2022 is almost at a close, which is honestly really kind of scary for a number of different reasons. However, 2022 was a year of great video games, and that is the main topic of today. The Game Awards are happening the night that I'm filming this, actually, so why not make my own top 10 list of my favorite games of 2022. Hi there, my name's Alex, or Quality, and welcome back to the channel. You'll notice I'm sitting in a chair this time as opposed to the floor like my other two videos. I got a few comments on that, and then I also kind of realized that after filming my Nintendo Switch collection video entirely on the floor, while that video ended up being trimmed down to about 33 minutes, the actual filming was over an hour. I experienced a lot of leg pain, like you will see in this clip here. Foot is asleep. Ah! Oh no. So I decided to be nice to myself and go sit in my very fancy chair that I have at my very nice desk instead. Whether or not this will be the permanent filming location, I'm not totally sure. We shall see. We shall see. But so far I'm liking it. It's very cozy, very nice, very gamery. So yeah. So before we get into this top 10 list, I want to give a few disclaimers. So one, the only games featured on this list are games that were released in the year of 2022. So even though I've played a lot of games this year, not all of them actually came out in 2022 because I have been working on my backlog. Backlog video coming soon, wink wink. But for this video, I wanted to focus on games that came out this year because there were a lot of really good ones that really deserve to be talked about. Second, this list is only comprised of games that I have played and have played all of. So you won't see anything like Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, any of the other Game of the Year nominees or any other big games that came out this year. One, because I don't have a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox and I just recently got into PC gaming, so I haven't really had the time to invest into some of those games that I had missed on other consoles, as well as I'm still primarily a Nintendo person, so even though I'm branching out, I'm grabbing a bunch of different stuff and diversifying the games I play, I'm still primarily a Nintendo person. So it is going to be mostly Nintendo Switch games. However, there are two games that I played on Steam that are also on Nintendo Switch, which I'll talk about when we get there. Third and final, and probably the most important, remember this is my list. I'm not saying this is the definitive list of all time. Like if you don't agree with my number one pick, then either I'm wrong or you're wrong. No. This is my list based on my experiences and what I look for in a game, which could be very different than what you look for in a game. I think that's kind of the cool thing about games. We all have different opinions and we all have a lot to talk about when it comes to those. So if there's a game on my list that you think, whoa, why didn't this make it? Or, you know, maybe she should give this a try. Please let me know in the comments down below. Tell me what your game of the year is and maybe, you know, feel free to even write your top 10. Why not? I love to see them. And so before we get into the actual list, I do have two honorable mentions. The first one is a game that, had I had more time, probably would have been in the top half of this list. However, I am quickly running out of time to play this in 2022. You might have already guessed it based on my Nintendo Switch collection video. For that game is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I know. I really hoped that I could sneak it in after Pokemon, but Pokemon actually took me a lot longer than I thought it would. So I really just didn't have the time to start this. Hopefully, this is my plan to do while I'm kind of taking a week off of stuff before the holidays. Start it at the very least. I'm not gonna finish it before the end of 2022, but the goal is to at least start it before 2023. So there you go. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because this is a game that I do see on a lot of other people's top game list of 2022 or as their game of the year. I wouldn't mention it if I didn't feel like this would be on this list had I played it. Which maybe you could argue that for a lot of games, but this is my list, so it doesn't matter. And then the other honorable mention, as I said, all of the games on this actual list are from 2022. However, this is a game that if you've been around here, have been around my Instagram, have been around on my Twitch, you have heard me talk about this game quite a bit over the past few months. It's been a game I've been playing since 2018, and this was the year that I played a lot of it again for the first time in a little bit. That's Octopath Traveler. Have I finished it still? No. No. But again, worth a mention because that is probably of the games that did not come out in 2022, probably the game that I played the most of this year. Dragon Quest XI might be kind of like right behind it because it It did bleed over into 2022, but I played a lot of Octopath this year, so I figured it was worth a mention. And without further ado, let's get on to the actual list. So number 10 is a game that I played recently on stream, just kind of on a whim. I was looking for something really short and very cozy to play because I had been dealing with some kind of rough mental health stuff, so I was like, let's find just a nice little cozy game to do a one-off of. And I'll be honest, this game kind of took me by surprise by how much I just enjoyed it entirely. So a little to the left is a puzzle game that is extremely cute, where you're doing puzzles all about your daily life. You have multiple different levels with a bunch of different kinds of puzzles, some really easy, some way more difficult. But so overall, there's a wide array of difficulty. And if a puzzle is ever too difficult, there is actually a hint system that's really cool, where you take an eraser and you erase part of the picture that shows you the solution. You can pick how much of the solution you want to see. I think that's a really, really cool way to give hints, because it really puts how much knowledge you want to have in your hands on how to solve this puzzle. So while there's no concrete story, you really get a feel for these people's lives by doing all of these different puzzles of honestly sometimes very mundane tasks, like organizing a toolbox or cutting shrubs or wiping up the paw prints of your mischievous feline friend who makes an appearance many times throughout the game. Even though it's a pretty short game, I really did want to mention it on this list. The biggest thing that really stuck out to me about this game is the art style. It's entirely hand-drawn. Everything is so stylized. There's really soft piano music in the background, so it just makes for a really relaxing time. Not only that, after the main story is done, they actually offer daily puzzles that you can go back to do every single day that offer kind of a new take, I believe, on some of the puzzles that they had before, and entirely new puzzles, which I kind of love. I love little daily puzzle things. I think that's really cute. Ultimately, this was a game that just totally took me by surprise. I had heard about it long ago, back during the Wholesome Direct, and then it kind of fell out of my memory for a little bit, and then it showed up in a Nintendo Indie World, which I was like, oh, hey, it's this game. Like, let me give it a try. This is one of the games that I played on PC. I've heard good things about the Switch version, but I'm personally glad I played it on the PC because it feels a little bit better for me there. It just, in my brain, it's a game that belongs on PC. But yeah, so this game just really took me by surprise, and it was very impactful and just very sweet and very nice. So big recommend at number 10. So also spoilers for this game as well as some of the others on this list coming up. Some of these games are remakes. However, they were my first time playing them, and they still technically came out in 2022, so it works. But at number 9, we have the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie Collection, but namely the Door to Phantomile. Klonoa is a new game series to me. As I mentioned in my Nintendo Switch collection video, I was just kind of taken by it, honestly, pretty instantly. Klonoa as a character is really cool. He's super cute, he's got a cool little outfit, and he's just a great little hero. So I had never even heard about Klonoa until this collection was announced in a Nintendo Direct back, I believe, in February. And I was kind of like, oh, cool. A lot of people on Twitter are talking about this. It must be a big deal. And so I didn't really think about it. And then TJ got it. And I was like, oh man, like, I guess let me try it out. And so I did. And I kind of fell in love with it right away. I played through about maybe half of the game just playing on his copy. And so then I got my own copy. And I loved it a lot. I still have not played the second one, and the collection does have both the first and the second game, but I really love the Door to Phantomile. So Klonoa is a platforming game. Honestly, it's kind of tricky. The nice thing about this collection, it does offer 2 different difficulty modes. One, which is the original, based off of the PlayStation 1 version, and the second is way easier. So Klonoa's weapon that he has is a wind bullet. So on the easier version, your wind bullet is actually longer, so it has a bigger reach to get enemies. Also, you know, there are unlimited lives, all of that kind of stuff. It makes for a bit easier of an experience, but for me, who is really terrible at platformers, it made it very nice and significantly less frustrating than I think it would have been if I would have played on the original difficulty. So the story is also extremely sweet and very good in my opinion. You go on an adventure with your little buddy Hugh Pow to go save the world of Phantomile from turning into a world of nightmares. Through that, you go through a bunch of different really cool locations such as a forest, a really pretty water-based area, and way more. There are lots of collectibles to pick up along your way too, which is honestly kind of addicting. I love doing that. And once you get to the end of the game, there's a twist. There's a big twist, and it's a very emotional twist. Basically, you're getting just punched in the gut over and over and over again at the end of this game. and it really took me by surprise. When you're going through the beginning of the game, it just seems like a really happy-go-lucky, very nostalgic feeling platformer, and then it gets emotional. Klonoa is another game that really took me by surprise this year. I never expected to pick it up, and I'm really, really glad that I ultimately did. So when looking for a fun little indie game to play during Halloween on stream, I stumbled across this very well-reviewed little gem called Strange Horticulture. And yeah, the reviews were right. This game is great. So Strange Horticulture is a very cool, very eerie feeling mystery game where you're the owner of a plant shop. And so while dealing with customers and trying to decipher what plants they need to go about their day, you go on riddle-based quests, pet your cat, and discover some of the very dark, deep secrets of Undermere in the surrounding areas. So aside from just being a nice, little soothing, very organizational kind of game with the occasional rain sound in the background to really, buff up the cozy vibes, this game actually has a really, really good story. Depending on a lot of your actions throughout the game, that'll determine the course of the story. There are multiple different endings, which I didn't realize when I was playing through. I ended up playing and getting 2 endings on stream, and I really want to go back and get some more because there are a lot of different options and different routes to go. Not only that, but there's also a lot to explore in the game. Everyone in this town has secrets, and it's up to you and your plants to sort things out. Despite not really being a point-and-click mystery game, this game gives off a lot of similar vibes, especially due to the types of puzzles that are involved in it. So the bulk of the game, you are determining what plants you're giving to certain customers based on the clues that they give you and consulting with your trusty little horticulture book. However, there are also puzzles involving deciphering where you need to go on a map, using secret codes to open secret compartments in your desk that you didn't know about, and etc. So even though this was a game that I played for Halloween, I really do think that this is a game that can be played year-round. It's a great little time if you want something a little bit eerie, a little bit spooky, but also still very calm and cozy. Again, just another game that took me by complete surprise this year. So coming in at number 7, we have a big game that released this fall, and that is Splatoon 3. Now, I'm very new to the Splatoon series. In fact, I only played a little bit of the first one on the Wii U. I never actually owned it, I only borrowed it. I never played any of Splatoon 2. So Splatoon 3 is the first Splatoon game I ever owned, and I really have been enjoying it. I understand that there are some things in it that did not carry over from previous installments of the series, as well as there are some other issues that I have it, such as like some of the way that Splatfests are run, but I'm still having a really great time with it, and I do think it deserves to be on this list regardless. And again, as a newbie to the series, this game does exactly what I need it to introduce me into how Splatoon plays and how the games work, so it does its job well. For those who have never played Splatoon, it's basically a very intense 4v4 paintball kind of game. You have a variety of different weapons and abilities to choose from to really customize your character so you can play how you want to play. So the mode that I was just describing, this turf mode, which is kind of the main mode of the game. However, there are also other modes such as Salmon Run, where you are on a team of 4 people going up against hordes of enemies. There's also a story mode too, which I haven't delved that deep into, but it seems pretty cool. Gameplay is super fast paced, so you're basically in and out of a match within 2 minutes, so long as there aren't any connection issues, Nintendo. But it makes it the perfect pick up and play competitive game. You can also play with friends, of course, but sometimes it's just really, really fun to just get thrown onto a random team and just go ham and see what happens. It's a very rewarding feeling when you win, and I really now understand why people love this game so much. There are weapons for all different types of players of different skill levels, which was really good for me because I was able to kind of customize how I wanted to play around how new at the game I was. And that was really, really nice because it finally allowed me to learn all of the fun that Splatoon was about. And even though I said something negative about Splatfests earlier, I still really love the idea of Splatfests, and I love the vibe that Splatfests give off, partly because of Anarchy Rainbow playing in the background. That's just such a hype song, but it really does feel like, everybody's getting together for a big party, a big competition. I really like it. So I think as my personal entry point into the series, I really think Splatoon 3 deserves to be on this list exactly where it's at. It's a pretty fun game. It's a pretty darn fun game. Oh boy, so I'm very excited to hear what people have to say about this one, because this honestly surprised me that it made this list. It wasn't going to when I first got it. However, it really has won me over the past few days, and you can probably guess what it is by how nervous I am and how reluctant I am to show it. However, Pokemon Violet, aka Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, are number 6 on this list. So I get it. There are a lot of glitches, making it unplayable for some people, and that's totally valid, and I totally get it. Thankfully for me, I did not experience a ton of glitches. There were a few really wonky things here and there, but otherwise there wasn't anything that super broke the game unless you walked into a town, which is still pretty terrible, I will say, I will admit. However, there was a lot of really good stuff in this game that I really do want to talk about and why I think it deserves to be on this list. Right in the middle, it still is not in the top half, but right in the middle. So Pokemon's first fully fledged open world game really has a lot of good stuff going into it. There's so much that you can do, either picking one of the 3 storylines, just hunting for Pokemon at your leisure, just running around and exploring and seeing some of the sights. There is a lot to do, and it does feel like this is the perfect direction for Pokemon to start going in personally. And so for starters, I love the new Pokemon. This is the first Pokemon game in a while that I've really just been like, oh my gosh, I'm really into all of these new Pokemon. Like, I was actually excited for the new Pokemon. Usually I stick with a lot of my like traditional buddies, but basically this was the first time in a Pokemon game that I tried to use all exclusively new Pokemon, minus Umbreon, because I always have to have an Umbreon on my team. That's just how it goes. But there are so many cool ones. Darkspun, my love. Greavard, my love. I might have a bias towards some of the dogs, but there's so much. And the nice thing too is with how open it is and how you see the Pokemon in the overworld, that's something that I really love that they changed about Pokemon games recently in general. Every time you stumble across a brand new one, it's like, what the heck is that? Which I really, really, really love. I think it's super cool. And it helps that a lot of the Pokemon designs are genuinely really interesting or extremely adorable. I also really do love the freedom that you have throughout the game too. You don't have to commit yourself to any which storyline at any given time. You could quite literally start a storyline or start the next chapter of a storyline and then go off and do something else and be like, I'm gonna come back and do this later, like whatever. I really appreciate that because it felt like I was really building my own adventure by not just going through the gyms first, another storyline. Like, it felt like I was really truly picking and choosing my own adventure, which felt really nice and has been a dream of mine since I was a kid. So first you have your gym story, which is pretty like unchanged from previous entries into the series. It's still really fun. I love all of the gym leaders. The gym challenges are a little dopey at times, but they were kind of funny. They were really funny. But I love the gym leaders, and I'll talk more about the characters in a little bit because they're kind of what really made this game for me, but still. So gym challenge, pretty much normal as always. Star Road is actually really cool because it introduces a whole new aspect of gameplay where you're running through their base and just kind of throwing your Pokemon out to go fight their Pokemon within a certain time limit. It's not super hard, but it does kind of break up some of the possibly monotonous battling you might be going through. Of course, it ends with a big boss battle, and then you get more information about that storyline. Finally, my favorite, and I think it's a lot of other people's favorites too, but the Titan storyline is just, and mainly that's because of Arvin, who, yes, I am a part of the Arvin fan club, but I really think that that's probably one of the best storylines. Even though those ones go by really, really quick, that's also how you update your legendary Pokemon to get them to do new abilities, as well as it ultimately culminates in a very emotional story that once you finish all 3 of those storylines, come together for one big grand finale, which took me by complete and utter surprise. I think this might be one of my favorite Pokemon stories in a long time, like since Black and White, honestly. It was very emotional. It actually felt fleshed out. I also wasn't annoyed by any of the companion characters at the end either, which is a big plus because that has been a problem in recent years. But so going back to the characters, I think where this game really shines are the characters that you run into, whether they be the teachers at your academy who are all just hilarious and just have very big personalities. The gym leaders, as I said, have really, really cool like backgrounds and archetypes too. And then the Elite Four were probably my favorite because they actually feel like friends and co-workers. Like, it's not like they're just like standing in a room all by themselves. It's like, no, they have lives outside of being a part of the Elite Four, which I think it's cool. Even if that's happened in other Pokemon games, it's like, it's very established and a part of the world here, which I really think is super duper cool. Overall, underneath all of the messes of glitches, I really do think there's a good game here. Should the glitches be ignored? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I enjoyed this game way more than I thought I would. And I'm really glad that I did. I'm really, really glad. I'm excited to get into the post game. It deserves to be on this list. This game made me feel a happiness that I have not known in a while. So it's on the list. All right, so we're getting to number 5, the top half of the list. And next, we have a game that quite literally made me scream on stream when I was reacting to the Nintendo Direct that it was announced in. As many of you know, I'm a big fan of Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's one of my favorite games, not only on the Switch, but of all time. And when they announced the little gem known as Fire Emblem Warriors, Three Hopes, I died because I was so excited to get back to hanging out with all these wonderful characters that I had fallen in love with. So as typical with Warriors games, you are thrown onto this map with a few other people that you control, and you're going through this big map with a number of different objectives. You have one overarching objective as well as a number of smaller objectives. So you might have to go escort somebody to a different point of the map, or you might just have to do a boss battle, who knows, it's different every single time. And while you're doing that, you are going up against just thousands of enemies, and you're just beating them to a pulp, and it feels great. I know Musou games aren't a big thing for a lot of people, like they're not a lot of people's favorite type of game, but also the fact that they did that specifically with the characters for Three Houses. There is already a Fire Emblem Warriors, but that's more of a mashup kind of game where they have a bunch of different Fire Emblem characters from different games in the series. This is exclusively Three Houses characters, as well as it adds an entire alternate storyline to the original game. So you are now seeing things from the perspective of Shez, who is a brand new character completely unrelated to the original storyline, and seeing how things play out after they run into the Garrigmach house leaders as opposed to Violet in the original game. So as you go through that, you get to pick what route you go. I of course chose Blue Lions. I have not gotten to do the other routes, unfortunately, which is exactly why this is very middle of the road, which just kind of shows you how good I found one of the routes to be. But so as I said, you get to be in charge of one of these houses yet again, so you have a whole bunch of characters at your disposal, as well as characters you can recruit later on. All these characters have their own way of fighting, different abilities, different weapons they can use, etc., etc. The class system also returns from Fire Emblem games, which I think is kind of cool that they were able to incorporate that, because it does make for interesting and unique gameplay depending on what route you take some of your characters. Which, as I said, of course, the characters are a big aspect of it. One of my favorite parts of this game is the fact that I got to spend more time with these characters that I love so much. You get kind of different parts of their backstory depending on the characters that you do support conversations with, or just talking to them in your encampment, as well as you get to see an entire alternate story play out. That gives kind of some background information on some of the things that aren't wrapped up in Three Houses. So I think it's a really great little companion game, just kind of how Age of Calamity was for Breath of the Wild. It just kind of makes the whole story a little bit bigger whilst not rehashing any big story details from the original game. But yeah, so as soon as I get some more free time, I definitely hope to return to play the other two routes, because I've heard that the Golden Deer one is the best one. I'm very excited to try that out at some point in time. We did Pokemon Violet. Now it's time to get to the game that I still think is the best Pokemon game on the Switch. It's Pokemon Legends Arceus. Again, I've said a lot about this game already, but I'm gonna get even more in depth right now. So despite my praises for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I do still think this is the better Pokemon game on the Switch. One, it's a lot less glitchy. It still has its moments. It still has its moments, but it's a lot less very obviously glitchy, again, at least in my experience. But another big part of it is I don't know if I would have been as excited for Scarlet and Violet if Arceus hadn't come out at the beginning of the year, because Arceus really made me fall in love with Pokemon again, with how different it was from the rest of the games. Like, it truly was the most fun I had had with a Pokemon game in a long while. So this game strays away from the main gym component by actually focusing on catching all of the Pokemon around you. So you're traversing this almost open world, you still have different loading zones, and it's all based on Ancient Sinnoh, aka the Hisui region, and you're going around and catching all these Pokemon working on the first ever Pokedex. So it's really cool. You can really just go catch Pokemon without having to initiate a battle. Then you do it. It gets really addicting, just kind of throwing Pokeballs at different Pokemon, trying to catch them in the wild. But if you do end up getting into a battle, which there are some, there are still trainer battles, they go by so much faster than they do in Scarlet and Violet and other mainline Pokemon games. Mainly because status effects are more streamlined, so it creates just less text boxes, the battle moves faster. It's also cool because Arceus introduces the strong style and the agile style battle moves, which determines your place in the turn order. It's not just normal, okay, you go, then I go, you go, then I go. It actually changes depending on a number of different features about the Pokemon, which I thought was really cool because, again, it didn't take any more of my time, but it was a new kind of experience which kept it interesting. So the story might not be nearly as feel-good as Scarlet and Violet, but it's still pretty interesting in its own right. So you basically get dumped into Hisui by Arceus against your will, and you're left there to fend for your own life. You get picked up by the Survey Corps, and that's when you begin all of your Pokemon research, eventually leading you to figuring out what the heck is going on with the hole in the sky that you fell through. The post-game is also very interesting. And just know that if you are a fan of Gen 4 Pokemon and you have not played the post-game, you're in for a treat, and that's all I'm gonna say. Overall, I found Arceus to be a much more well-rounded Pokemon experience while still introducing a number of new elements that I really wish had made an appearance in Scarlet and Violet, which is why it ended up being a little bit higher on the list. All right, we're on to number 3, which is perfect because number 3 is triangle strategy. I didn't even plan that. That was totally spontaneous. So Team Asano did it again with another gorgeous HD 2D styled game, but this time it's a tactical RPG. So in this game, you are taking on the role of Serenoa, who is the son of the House Wolfort, who is an affluential house in the kingdom of Glenbrook. So you are about to get into arranged marriage with Frederica from a neighboring kingdom to strengthen relations between the two. However, political turmoil begins, and now the peaceful country that you knew has now become war-torn, and it's up to you to make things right in some way, shape, or form. However, depending on your convictions and the choices you make throughout the story, that changes your fate. There are a number of different endings to get, 3 main ones and then 1 golden ending. All of them are so different from each other. Like, there's a lot of crossover, however, each storyline, depending on what decisions you make, can sway the story in either really small ways or extremely big ways. So it's worth giving it a few replays, especially to get that golden ending, which I actually still haven't gotten yet. I still have to go back and do that. So the gameplay is typical tactical RPG, very similar to Fire Emblem. You have a grid and you're controlling your different units on this field in order to beat your enemies. But the interesting part about this are the terrains and the different locations that you go to throughout the game. Sometimes you're on a ship, sometimes you're in a really hilly area. So depending on where you're at geographically and what's going on terrain-wise around you, as well as the types of characters that you've recruited, because there are a lot of recruitable characters that you can add onto your party, that will completely determine the choice of your strategy throughout the battle. Again, there are lots of choices to make in this game, which is why it's so appealing. It really does feel like it's your story that you're picking and sorting your way through, which I really love. I really, really love that. And so another cool thing that if you're not super familiar with tactical RPGs, there are a lot of difficulty levels to play on. There's an easy level, I think there's normal, hard, something akin to maddening. I think there are 4 off of the bat, but I can't remember, at least 3. So if you're brand new into these types of games, there's a difficulty for you. If you're a hardcore player, there's a difficulty for you. It doesn't affect the story at all. Like, no matter what difficulty you're playing it on, everything still feels extremely rewarding and feels like this grand, very dramatic adventure. So that's why it's number 3 on my list. So next is a game that I think a lot of people might have thought was my game of the year. However, that has recently changed. But that doesn't mean that this game is bad by any stretch of the imagination, obviously, because it's number 2. This was extremely close. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So for Kirby's first big 3D adventure, they really knocked it out of the park. So Kirby mysteriously gets transported to the New World, along with a bunch of his Waddle Dee pals who he has to go save from the Beast Gang. As you're traversing this big, brand new world, you also are working towards getting to the bottom of why you're there to begin with. So accompanied by Elephant, one of the cutest little companions of all time, you traverse this extremely ruined world through an abandoned mall, through an abandoned theme park, a volcano. There are lots of different worlds to explore within this game. All of them are extremely stylized and feel like so fleshed out. It's really honestly incredible. And the story is honestly pretty darn great too. And then when you get to the post game, it even fleshes out the story even more. It's really interesting. It gets a little scary, honestly, but it's so good and I love it. In terms of gameplay, I found it pretty easy to control. As I mentioned in my first Switch game recommendation video, I found that Kirby is a much easier platformer to play in comparison to especially something like Klonoa, but also Mario. There's also 2 different difficulty levels for Kirby as well, but for the most part, the normal one is still pretty easy, but it allows you to really focus on the world around you. And that's also not to say that just because it's easy, it's not that it's boring. It's really actually not. So copy abilities make a return in this game, but you also get to upgrade your copy abilities. So you have this tornado move that you can upgrade like 3 different times, not just to make it more powerful, but to make it do other things that you can use it to interact with the environment. In all of these different really cool locations, you're also looking for all of your Waddle Dee companions, which I'll get into more in a minute. But so you're interacting with the environment to try to find your Waddle Dee friends, whether that be opening a secret door or doing a little challenge that you just kind of see out of the corner of your eye. The world is really immersive and really fun to explore. And the copy abilities only make that even bigger and better. You also have a pretty good variety of final bosses as well. A lot of them are really silly. A lot of them are really silly, but it makes sense for a Kirby game. But so Waddle Dee Town, as you collect more and more Waddle Dees, they'll move into Waddle Dee Town, thus expanding the town and adding more things in there. As I mentioned, you get a restaurant, there's a little fishing pond that Kirby can fish at, there's an arena, there's a lot to do there. So there's even more incentive to wander around kind of in the levels and see what you can find. But yeah, the story of this game was really good. Almost made me cry on stream. The game that actually made me cry for the first time on stream we're getting to next, but I wholeheartedly recommend Kirby. It was so close to being my #1, but it's such a good game. It's such a good game. So Kirby in the Forgotten Land gets a big heart from me. So here we are, Game of the Year. And this was a big surprise to me because I really thought that it was gonna be Kirby, and then I finished this gem of a game and I could not put it at #1. It was such a big surprise. Such a small RPG, but such an impactful one. I love it so much. That's Live Alive. So Live Alive is a game that originally came out on the SNES, but also announced during that same February 2022 Direct that a lot of these games were. The remake for it was announced. Again, in a gorgeous HD 2D art style. I had to have it. It had been recommended to me, but it had never been localized in the US, and I just kind of didn't have an incentive, and then it came to the Switch, and then my fate was set, so there you go. So Live Alive is a game full of different kinds of stories. So you have several different protagonists whose stories take place in different points in time. So for example, you have a prehistory chapter where a caveman is your protagonist. You have a Wild West chapter where a lone cowboy is your protagonist. And then you have a distant future chapter where a little adorable robot, who I love very dearly, is your protagonist. Not only that, but each storyline offers different ways to kind of go through and play. Not all of them are specifically traditional JRPG elements. So for the present day chapter, you're actually basically playing a fighting game. You select the boss that you want to go up against in any order you want, and that's how you play the game. There's no map to navigate. Whereas in the near future chapter, there is kind of a town map where you walk around, you'll face different enemies as you're walking around the town, then you go into areas to further explore them. Each protagonist also has their own kind of special ability as well, so each character feels like a different character. And the big thing, which is the most important part to me in this game, is the story. Each chapter has a really cool and interesting storyline. You have some shorter chapters, some extremely long chapters, but each of them feel like a fleshed out story. So by the end of it, you don't really have any questions like, oh, well, like, well, why didn't this get tied up? Like, you're just looking at little vignettes of these people's lives, and it works so effectively. And then once you get to the end of the game, there is a major twist, a major twist that I still can't get over. over, but it is truly what sold me on this game even further. It was good before then, but after that, I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh. So I also found the combat in this game extremely easy to learn. You're on a grid, but it's not so much like a tactical RPG because you and the enemies around you can move freely. So basically it's you, any party members you might have, and any enemies on this playing field. All of your moves take time to charge. Some they're immediately ready to go, some take a few turns. You can also do things such as pass, wait, use items, etc. It might sound really complicated, but after 1 or 2 battles, you really start to kind of pick up on it and be like, oh, this is how this works. And of course, your position on the map also matters, kind of similar to tactical RPGs, is if you attack from the side or the back, you might end up doing some more damage than you would if you're attacking head on. It's easy to learn, but it's really, really fun to master. Combat also plays a very drastically different role depending on the storyline that you're currently playing. You also don't have to commit yourself to one storyline either. You can switch back and forth as much as you like. So say you kind of get tired of one and you want to try something different, that's totally fine. All of your progress is still saved in the other one and you can just go switch to another storyline at your leisure. And I'd be completely remiss without mentioning the soundtrack and the voice acting. Literally incredible in both ways. The soundtrack is super boppin'. It takes a lot of the original SNES tracks as well as adds a few other ones, and it keeps the same level of nostalgia from the original soundtrack, but freshens it up and makes it extremely enjoyable to listen to. There are so many songs that are just so hype. I love it a lot. And the voice acting, there are some really talented voice actors in this game. It's basically entirely voice acted. There are some characters that don't get a voice, but there's a lot of incredible talent in this game, and it made it an even better experience for me. I won't say some of my favorites because they're very big spoilers, but there's a part of the game where the voice acting alone almost made me like start shaking because it was so good and the writing is so good and just there's so many good things about this game. But so overall, Live Alive is just, it's incredible. I cried when I finished this game on stream. 1, because it felt like a huge accomplishment, but 2, I did not expect the emotions at the very end of this game, and yet they hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm so grateful that I got to experience this game and I got to share it with my Twitch community because it was a really great series, and I'm so glad you're here, Live Alive. I'm so glad you're here. But this is my game of the year, no contest. Well, and there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 game of the year list. Woo! It was really fun to make, and also honestly very, very difficult to kind of organize what game was going where. There are a few that definitely could have been swapped, but I think this list is pretty solid. So again, this is just my list. Let me know your list in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoy this kind of a video, as well as my other videos, you know, maybe consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that bell notification, giving it a thumbs up. I still don't have the whole YouTube thing figured out yet, but you know, it'd be great if you could do all those things. And as I mentioned in this video, I do also stream a variety of games on Twitch, many Nintendo, lots of indie games, some RPGs. It's a big, fun, chaotic time over there, and I'd love to see you there. So maybe stop by, drop a follow, and say hi, and join us over there too. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one where we will finally tackle the much requested backlog video and hopefully maybe tackle some of the actual backlog along the way. But until then, I'll see you later. Goodbye!